Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So, this is something I've wanted to go through for a while now, and I wanted to go through basically what I do when I get a new module. And this will help you figure out how to set up your HOTAS gear, I think, a little bit easier. There's a misconception when it comes to setting up joysticks and throttles and rudder pedals. If you come from the golden age of flight sims like I do, back in the day, you had your Thrustmaster gear, and you had to program it because most of the games and simulations had everything bound to a keyboard, and they didn't have the ability within the software to be able to bind keys within the software itself. So you used an external program provided by Thrustmaster, provided by CH, provided by Cytec, whoever made the joystick you had. There was usually programming software that was provided outside of that. And in the early days, you pretty much had to do it like a text editor, and there was like a company like for Thrustmaster that made software because Thrustmaster didn't even make their own that was good other than handing you instructions and telling you to have at it. In 2020, you don't need programming software to get the most out of your HOTAS gear. The only thing you need programming software for instance, I have a Thrustmaster HOTAS Warthog joystick, I have a Thrustmaster TWCS throttle, and I have the Thrustmaster T-Flight pedals. How my gear is set up is my joystick is plugged in via a USB, my throttle is plugged in via USB, my pedals are plugged directly into the RJ11 jack on the TWCS throttle. So my pedals show up as an axis on the TWCS throttle, not as a separate entity. So when you're looking here, you see it says throttle, you see Xbox controller, you see joystick, you see track IR over here. These are all the things that are plugged in USB, and that's what is seen by DCS World. So, a couple things that can be problematic. I have this Xbox controller plugged in. So because I have that plugged in, it also binds some things by default to the Xbox controller. I like to leave the controller plugged in because I play games like Doom Eternal, Battlefront 2, games that make use of a gamepad better than a keyboard and mouse for me, and that's why it's plugged in. But it can mess you up. So what I like to do first and foremost, just so I can leave it plugged in, is I'll go through here and I'll pick this device, and then I'll go through and make sure nothing is bound to it. So we go here, I'm going to go clear. I'm going to go there, I'm going to go clear. We're going to clear that, clear that, clear that, clear that, just so it's not causing me any problems. Now the average person isn't going to have to do this, but I just wanted to show you this because the reason I'm showing you this is, there are people, if you have an extra controller plugged in and you're flying DCS and you're like, why is my plane hanging to the right? Why is my plane rolling to the left? Why is my pitch messed up? Well, if you have it sitting on a table next to your desk or on your desk upside down, those little analog controllers might be bent to a direction, and that explains exactly why you can have a conflict and things can be interfering. So, one of the nice things about DCS World is how it handles USB controllers. So, I'm going to click the first trigger on my Warthog joystick. Now the first detent is button 1, and that's NR-23 cannon fire button. If I press it all the way in, it goes to the second click, and the second click is set up as N-37D cannon fire button. So guns is 1, cannons is the other click, and it continues to hold the guns in when I hit the cannon, which is pretty cool. So that's pretty cool. Let's see what else I have. And as I click buttons on this controller, it's going to highlight what is already assigned to the controller. There's nothing on my pinky button. The paddle is my wheel brake. The red button is my weapon release. Gun sight mode is the button that my finger can reach around to. So there's a couple of things I like to set up first and foremost. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do a search. We're going to do a search for Paws, because I like active pause. So I have active pause set up as button 2 on my TWCS throttle, and that allows me to pause the simulation so I can look around in the cockpit. So Active pause is off, active pause on. Now I can go heads down in the cockpit, look around, and I do not have to worry about wrecking. And this is very helpful when you just get in the cockpit and you're like, oh man, how do I do this? You know, oh wait a minute, if I do this, I'll arm my external weapons. Even though there is none on it at the moment, but just an example, you know. It's very helpful to have active pause, and that is one of the essential ones, if you ask me. Now, another thing I have set up, if you notice, there's labels on. I know people lose their mind over labels, so I also have another button set up to remove the labels. So it's just one press. And let's go back and adjust controls, and I'm going to press that button, and that button is joystick button 6 on my TWCS throttle, which is the push or press button of the little mouse cursor device that's built into the disc, the round disc that's built into the TWCS throttle. Okay, let's see what else we have. So pushing down on that hat gives me the gun safety cover. Pushing up on the other hat on my Warthog joystick is gun sight target distance increase. Pushing down is target distance decrease. Pushing to the left is target wingspan adjustment dial decrease, and then to the right is increase. These are already pre-set up for me within DCS World, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to look around and press some other buttons. There's my landing gear handle down, landing gear up, air brake open, air brake close, air brake open, flaps up, flaps down, very cool. And this one over on the side is my communications menu. And what I'm doing that you can't see is I'm pushing buttons on my TWCS throttle and my joystick to see what's assigned. So the first place you're going to go beyond the assignment of the buttons is you're going to go in here and you're going to see what is bound to things. Now what usually happens is my rudder is usually wrong. Look at the Xbox controller. It was assigned axes. We don't want that, so we're going to go in here and we're going to clear it. We're going to go in here, we're going to clear it. Anything for that Xbox controller because I don't want to use it. However, I've seen and heard of people using an Xbox controller to set it up purely for like the Rio seat of the F-14. Fantastic idea. So you don't have to mess around with your HOTAS controls. You can keep all your HOTAS gear, your stick and your throttle the way you want it. You can pick up that controller when you want to do backseat stuff. So there are benefits to using yet another controller, one that most people haven't always thought of. I'm going to go to my stick and I'm going to go to my Y. I want to show you this for a reason. Axis assignment. No, axis tune is what you're going to go to. Every time I set up my pitch and my roll, I give it a dead zone of 5 and a curvature of 15. This is a starting point. Some people might have sloppy joysticks, so theirs might not recenter properly, and what the dead zone does is give you a wider area to basically let it do that. So if you have a sloppy joystick, you might want to set that dead zone a little bit higher. But 5 and 15 is a reasonable starting point, so I have it set up for the pitch, and I have it set up for the roll that way. And again, this is just a starting point. Others' mileage may vary. So my rudder pedals. Usually when I jump in here, my rudder pedals are set up as a different axis because it doesn't know that my T-flight pedals are plugged directly into the throttle. So what you do is you just set it up and then you move it and it picks it up as joystick slider 2. My rudders are set. You don't need to tune the axis for this unless you have sloppy rudder pedals, and mine seem to be fine. My thrust. Go in there, click it, move what you're going to use as your throttle up and down until it finds it and it sees that is joystick Z, and I hit OK. And the throttle you don't usually have to set up for tuning the axis. The other thing I do set up that wasn't in here at first is joystick slider 1 on my TWCS. So that is the zoom view. I go in here and there's a little dial at my pinky. And this is an essential thing that I like to set up all the time. Got to have that zoom. So those are pretty much my essentials, and now I can zoom in and out of the cockpit. I can turn the labels on or off. I can hit the active pause off and get back to flying. I can hit my first trigger. It's going to fire the guns on the one side. I'm going to hold it in all the way, and it's going to start firing the cannon along with it. pretty cool. And the one thing I've noticed is, for instance, in the Anton, I think it was, when I did the free trial of it, it did not even have my cannon set up, or my guns rather set up at all. I had to go in there and actually assign it. So depending on what module you get, they're not all the same in terms of what they actually set up for you to begin with. You'll find that you'll buy a module and sometimes some things will be set up for you. Other times they won't be, and you're going to have to go in there and set them up from scratch. But these are the things that I prefer to do more than anything. So like I said, first thing, go in there, pick reel, go axis commands, and make sure your pitch and your yaw is set up where you want it. And the axes are tuned. Make sure your rudder is set up. Make sure your thrust is set up for your throttle. And then make sure you have, if you have a slider on your HOTAS gear, and many people do with the SATEC stuff, or even, most of the SATEC or the Logitech stuff has like dials on it too that you could set up to use as a zoom in and out. Definitely one of the more essential commands to have set up. And again, active pause is another one. Turning labels on and off. And the thing I like about that is I'm in and I'm looking around and I lost track of a target, you know. Well, yeah, I'm going to cheat. I'll turn labels back on. Oh, that's where it went, you know, and then turn it back off. It's just nice to have some of these things in a convenient place that, you know, you're used to. And the other thing I would suggest is when you set these things up, you know, try to set them up so you have some of the functions that you use all the time in a common place, you know. On the TWCS, I picked the TDC control to be that little cursor disk instead of a hat switch. Sometimes it'll be already set up, depending on the module, as a hat switch. If you try to keep things somewhat common, when it comes time to switch to a different plane, you kind of remember, oh, that's where that is. My wheel brakes are always on the toe brakes on the throttle. My nose wheel steering is always that paddle button. You know what I mean? Where my pinky goes on the Warthog. You know, stuff like that really goes a long way and helps you out. Now, there's one other thing I want to show you. And this is going to help you for VR. So if you go to this drop down right here at the very top left, you want to go down to UI layer. Now, this is going to help you in VR when you set up your gear as well. Make sure you have this. So this is POV1 on my TWCS, and basically that is to reset my VR. And then, yeah, VR spyglass zoom, and then regular zoom, that's the recenter. That's the spyglass zoom, which is the bigger zoom, and this is the little zoom. And what happens is, if I hold this in, it holds the zoom at the maximum that it goes. And I let it go, and it snaps back. If I go to this one, it resets my cockpit view for me in VR. So these are very, very helpful things to have. And again, basically these are just the UI layer things, you know what I mean, that, you know, is common across the board. No matter what module you're in, this is going to be recenter VR headset. This is going to be toggle VR spyglass zoom. This is going to be toggle VR zoom, no matter what aircraft I'm flying in, if I'm doing it in VR. So I just wanted to make that clear, because a lot of people don't know that this is in here. Everybody's looking for all the commands in the F-14, you know, or in, you know, the KA-50. You know, you're looking for things and you're not going to find them in here because those commands are hidden under the UI layer only. And the UI layer is common across the board. So no matter what module you're in, these commands will work. So something to consider. And I think it makes things just a little bit easier that way, if you ask me. So those are the steps that I like to go through to get a module set up and ready to go for my gear. And then, you know, see what's already there. And like I said, go in here, adjust controls, and start hitting buttons, because then you'll see what they gave you already. And then you know what you have to add at that point. You know what I mean? You can, you know, change, like this is the trimmer up, trimmer down, aileron left, aileron right, trim. You know, a lot of them are going to be already set up for you, but it helps to know what they are. And you can know what they are literally by going in here and just pressing buttons. This is what you want to do before you start changing anything, because you might be comfortable with what's already there. And again, all of this stuff is done within the simulation. You don't have to screw around with target software from Thrustmaster, CH software, Cytec software, whatever. You don't have to set up a profile. And here's the other thing. Why would you want to use a profile somebody else set up? Because you're going to do something the way somebody else did it. Why not do it the way you want to? That's the great thing about HOTAS gear is you can set it up the way you want to. Then do it that way. Stop asking for a profile from somebody. I see this all the time on Reddit, on Facebook groups, everywhere. Hey man, do you have a profile for the Hornet? You know, like why would you want somebody else's, you know? Not to be rude, but quit being lazy and set it up for your damn self, because you're going to be happier that way, because you're going to remember better what this is, what that is, you know, and you won't be stuck with, oh man, that guy set up the TDC on the hat switch. I would really like to have it over here on the throttle, you know, or, you know, target designate with the push button on the TDC instead of a button that's on the stick. You're going to be stuck to what somebody else did. Do it your way. And the greatest part of this is DCS makes it super freaking easy. It's literally that easy. So I just wanted to show you guys that. A lot of people are, you know, getting new HOTAS gear and kind of a little overwhelmed if they haven't flown flight sims since the 90s or the early 2000s, when you really still did have to use software to get the most out of it. If you have DCS, you literally don't need software to get the most out of it. DCS is the software, and they provide all the tools right here to let you do it. And there's so many. If you go into here, I went under all, but if you go to arc compass, that's a sub command. The gun sight has sub commands. Central panel, cheats, whatever that is, auto start, auto stop, hints, communications menu. You know, it's all broken down. You can go all and see it all, or you could just kind of break it down. So very cool stuff, and it's all there, and it's not intimidating at all the way they have everything broke down. At least I don't think so. I'm not intimidated by it. And 9 times out of 10 you're going to go in here and you're going to find out it's literally set up for you anyway. You might have to change a couple things, but that's about it. So I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Those are the things I find most useful. So to reiterate, active pause is definitely something that you want to be using. It allows you to, you know, stop what you're doing mid-mission and poke your head around the cockpit and get familiar with something, or push a button instead of jamming it into the ground, which I tend to do a lot. Your VR zooms, you know, those are going to come in handy. So there's one more thing I wanted to show you, and it is also part of what I usually do if I remember to do it. Is you go into your options and you're going to go over to special, and then you're going to find all your different modules that you have active over here on the left. Let's pick MiG-19 for instance. What you want to do is go through here, and most of the Russian planes, or foreign ones in general, allow you to change the wording within the cockpit. So usually it starts, you know, as Russian weathered or Russian factory fresh. I picked the English weathered for my MiG-19. Let's see if they have it in here. Yes, in the Mi-8, same thing. Chinese or English. MiG-21, English metric or Chinese. Ka-50, default or English. So that's another thing I like to do, because you end up really lost in the cockpit unless you know already what this button is or what that button is, etc. It's just going to make your life a little bit easier when you're getting familiar with a new module to have everything in English, unless you can read Chinese, unless you can read Russian. You know, hey, that's awesome if you can do that. But it's definitely going to make things easier. Same thing in all the Flaming Cliff stuff. You can use default or Chinese. Well, actually, not all of them. It looks like you don't have options for these guys. But one thing I will say, and I remember this, you can go on the Eagle Dynamics forums under the download section, and people have came out with mods that will put a lot of these cockpits in English that don't actually have one, like for the Flaming Cliffs modules. I do remember seeing that. So that is an option that may help you. Some of them just have what they have. Like, I wouldn't expect the, you know, Focke-Wulf 190 to have anything other than the default, but I bet you somebody made a mod to make it English instead of German. So, something to think about. And again, this is just under special, and this is where all the other little odds and ends are. And, you know, if you want to turn on the rudder trimmer in the KA50, go ahead and do it from here. You want default mode? Do you want central position trimmer mode? Joystick without springs to help use for a force feedback stick? The special area is what you want to look under, you know, after you're done doing all your keybinds and stuff, you know, because that way it gives you a better idea of what's up. So default or English. I believe in the Mirage it was in French, so I chose English. But under special is where you're going to find a couple little odds and ends, you know, that they allow to be toggled on or off within each module specifically. And everyone is a little bit different, as you can see. So check out the special tab under options to find any of this stuff. So I hope that helps, guys. Again, some of the most important things would be active pause, having your VR zooms set up under the UI layer, and again, not being afraid to jump in there and just, like I said, first step is go into controls to adjust controls and start pressing buttons on your gear and see what's already set up. Second, go in there to the axis commands and make sure you tune your axes and make sure they're all showing up the way they should. And more so, if you have other controllers plugged in, keep in mind they may interfere. And if you go in there and just clear commands from the controller you don't want to use, it can coexist just fine with your HOTAS gear. So, as always, guys, I hope this is very helpful for you. I've seen a lot of viewers mention they wanted kind of a little tutorial on this kind of thing. I'm hoping this is what you were looking for. Feel free to throw any questions up there. I'm always listening, and I'm always willing to help anybody out if I can. So as always, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit that like button. And until next time, guys.